Okay. How are we doing? Oh, I see there's some problem. No, there's no.
Is there a problem?
No, it's just that I have to reduce this a little bit. Is it still okay in the back? Okay. Shall we start? Okay, so today is June 9th, 2018. Okay, so we'll start with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so we've been working our way through the Book of the Twos in the Anguttara Nikaya. And as we've seen, the suttas in this collection cover a wide range of topics, and often there's no sort of logical sequence in the suttas, so we get it's a little bit like a kaleidoscope that we used to use as children. You just shift it a little bit and then you get a whole different configuration of colored stones, whole different images appear. Okay, so last time we came across a series of suttas that dealt with the correspondence between a Samma Sambuddha, a perfectly enlightened Buddha, and the wheel-turning monarch, the Raja Chakravarti. So the wheel-turning monarch, as you can say, is the counterpart in the mundane domain, the counterpart of the Samma Sambuddha, the perfectly enlightened one, in the spiritual domain. Okay, so now we come to another sutta which is dealing with the relation between the fully enlightened, perfectly enlightened Buddha and somebody else. This other type of person is called the Pacceka Buddha. And so the sutta says that there are two kinds of Buddhas, two kinds of enlightened ones. So what are the two? One is, we call it the Tathagata, the Arahat, the perfectly enlightened one. So technically this one, by type, is perfectly enlightened one. The Pali is Samma Sambuddha. And then the other one, who's seldom mentioned, very seldom mentioned in the texts of early Buddhism, is the Pacceka Buddha. Okay, I have this definition. Okay. And the Pacceka Buddha in Sanskrit, maybe some of you have come across this, in Sanskrit texts, is Pratyeka Buddha. But there's actually some, according to the investigations of contemporary scholars, some uncertainty about the exact original would have been used in an Indian language preceding Pali and preceding the Sanskritization of the text. And so what's interesting is that particularly this, I don't think this is so in the Pali tradition, but in the Sanskrit tradition, it said that like the special domain for realization of Pratyeka Buddhas is dependent origination, the links of dependent origination. So they come to be called, sometimes another word is used, pratyaya. Buddha, which would mean one who is enlightened to pratyaya is the same as Pali pacaya, one who is enlightened to conditions. And so you could see that there's a similarity, it appears in Sanskrit, between pratyeka and pratyaya. And in Pali, there would be some similarity also apparent. Okay, pacaya and pacheka. They look very similar. And so there's been some speculation that the original designation for this type of Buddha would have been in another Indian dialect that hasn't been preserved, in which there was some ambiguity between whether to render that word pratyeka or pratyaya, or in Pali, whether to render it pacaya or pacheka. So in this way, the original word came to be rendered in two words, pratyeka and pratyaya. And so on that basis, the idea developed, and you see this in the Lotus Sutra, Fa Hua Jing, that the pratyeka Buddha is one who becomes enlightened to dependent origination. Because dependent origination consists of the chain of pratyayas or pachayas, the chain or series of conditions. Okay, probably, well, first, in the suttas themselves, one doesn't find a formal explanation of the difference between these two kinds of Buddhas. But we find an explanation of the difference in a text in the Abhidharma Pitaka the text is called the Pugala Panyati, which means the analysis or explanation of different kinds of persons. And in that work, the Pugala Panyati, we have a whole list of definitions of different types of persons mentioned in the suttas. And the Pugala Panyati includes definitions, formal definitions of the two kinds of Buddhas. So it gives first the definition of who is the fully enlightened or perfectly enlightened Buddha, what kind of person. Okay, so it said that some person on his own, that is without learning anything from a teacher, awakens to the truths. So it says, samang sachani are the truths, the Four Noble Truths. So they awaken to, understand on their own the Four Noble Truths among things not heard before. And then it says, tattacha sabanyutang papunati, which means that he attains omniscience. And an important word is tatta, there. So this very early text, the Pugala Panyati, is not saying that the Buddha attains omniscience in an absolute sense, that the Buddha will know how many leaves are on the trees within the premises of Tuangyan Monastery in the year on June 9th, 2018. But it says omniscience there in regard to the truths, that is the Four Noble Truths. So that you could say that he understands like all of the implications, all the implications, all of the ramifications, all of the permutations of the Four Noble Truths. And then he attains mastery over the powers in the powers. So what are the powers that are referred to here? These will be, probably what's intended are the 10 special powers of knowledge that a Buddha possesses, a fully enlightened Buddha. These concern things like the workings of karma, the ability to know the different temperaments, inclinations, and mental tendencies of sentient beings, the knowledge of what kinds of conduct lead to the different destinations of sentient beings, to the different realms of existence, knowledge of the different spiritual faculties in sentient beings, whether they're weak, strong, dull, sharp, and then knowledge over about all of the different meditative attainments, how to attain them, how to stabilize them, how to emerge from them. Okay, so a fully enlightened Buddha has mastery over those powers. So those are the defining characteristics of a Sammasambuddha, a fully enlightened Buddha. Okay, then this Abhidhamma text, Pugala Panyati, then raises the question, what kind of person is called a Pacceka Buddha? And then it gives the definition, here some person on his own awakens to the truths among things not heard before. So a Pacceka Buddha, like a Sammasambuddha, discovers the Four Noble Truths on his own without depending on the instruction of anyone else, without needing a teacher to point out these are the truths. So that part is similar, at least the way the words are exactly similar to the case of the Sammasambuddha. But now we come to the difference, but he does not attain omniscience over them. So there are limits to the understanding of a Pacceka Buddha, limits to his range of knowledge. And he doesn't attain mastery over the powers. Okay, so that is the formal definition of a Pacceka Buddha. Yeah, the word Pacceka itself, okay, the Pali word comes from pati plus eka. Okay, so eka means one, and pati gives a sense of something like maybe an individualizing sense. So pati plus eka, in Pali, what happens when you get the I and an E meeting, then the TI turns to a double C. So we get Pacceka. So sometimes Pacceka Buddha is translated as an individual Buddha, sometimes as a solitary Buddha. But actually, when we look at the commentaries, you see that where they have the stories about the Pacceka Buddhas, they're not completely solitary. They hang out in little bands, little groups. And then sometimes it's translated or explained, Pacceka Buddha, explained as a silent Buddha. But again, that's not completely, it's not true, because the Pacceka Buddha doesn't keep completely silent, but they will give some teachings, but they don't try to enlighten others, to convey the truth of their realization to others. They'll give others instruction in morality, in ethics. They'll give them some instruction in basic meditation practices. it's said in the commentaries that they even ordain disciples and they take on disciples. And so then there'll be like little clusters of Pacceka Buddhas wandering around. But they don't try to communicate or convey the truth that they've realized. And they don't try to establish a sasana, the dharma in the world. You know, they don't establish a formal monastic order. They don't try to gather groups of disciples. They don't try to propagate the dharma widely in the world the way a Sammasambuddha does. Okay, then there is a set of poems, or it's actually one sutta made up of many verses, some 40 verses, that occurs in the Duka Nipāta. And that sutta, it's called Khagavisana Sutta, which means the rhinoceros horn, the horn of the rhinoceros. And those verses, according to the commentaries, not only in the Pali tradition, but also in the Sanskrit tradition, it's said that those verses were uttered by Pacceka Buddhas, that one Pacceka Buddha uttered one verse, another Pacceka Buddha uttered another verse. Maybe at most, one Pacceka Buddha would have uttered two verses that form a group. And so it's said that these verses had been collected together and then included in the Sutta Nipāta. So the Sutta Nipāta doesn't describe them to anybody. It just lays out the verses. But there's another Pali work which includes these verses, and that work ascribes them to the Pacceka Buddhas. That work, it's a late work of the Pali Sutta Pitaka. It's called the Upadana, which gives background stories, some background stories to our Buddha, then background stories to the Pacceka Buddhas, and then background stories to the great disciples, the disciples of the Buddha. Can you see, Dan? I see you're sort of craning your neck around. Maybe there's another seat where your view is not blocked, or you can move out someplace. I don't want you to injure your neck, stretching it out. Okay, so these verses, those verses from the Sutta Nipāta are also in the Upadana. But before we come to those verses in the Upadana, there's a series of verses which praise the Pacceka Buddhas. And then these verses are going to say, these were the verses spoken by the Pacceka Buddhas of old. Then comes the verses that are also in the Sutta Nipāta. And so these verses, these introductory verses, give us some understanding of the Pacceka Buddhas. So it's said that they performed, this is interesting, they performed services to the Buddhas of the past. And so, sort of part of the training to become a Pacceka Buddha is that one meets fully enlightened Buddhas and one serves them in various ways. One performs, makes offerings to them, or worships them, or takes care of them, provides them with medical services, and so on. And sometimes in the commentaries we see stories where some might be a person like a farmer, small shopkeeper, townsman. Somebody will meet a fully enlightened Buddha, and then he'll make some offering to the Buddha, and then he'll bow down to the Buddha, and then in his mind he makes a vow, may I come to a realization of the truth in the future. This person doesn't have the capacity to realize the truth under the Buddha, then the Buddha will look at that person and then gives a prediction that in the future you will become a Pacceka Buddha by the name of such and such. So they perform services to the Buddhas of the past, even maybe going forth and becoming monks, and then practicing meditation very vigorously, but with the vow to become a Pacceka Buddha in the future. Remember, maybe some of you may have known of Ajahn Mun, who was the one who sort of revitalized the Thai forest tradition in the 20th century. Okay, his teacher was also a Thai forest monk. I think his name was Ajahn Sao. And Ajahn Sao, it said, you see, Ajahn Mun was very skilled in teaching, giving discourses. He could attract many disciples. Whereas Ajahn Sao was very taciturn, very quiet. And it's said in the biography of Ajahn Mun that Ajahn Sao originally had the vow or aspiration to become a Pacceka Buddha. But Ajahn Mun sort of inspired him, his own teacher, incited his own teacher. Not to delay to the future, but to make the full, wholehearted effort in this life. And so Ajahn Sao, it said, also became an arhat. Then once you become an arhat, then you can't become a Pacceka Buddha, because you finished. Okay, so these performed services to the Buddhas of the past, but they didn't gain liberation under any Buddha. If they had gained liberation, then there's no need to become a Pacceka Buddha, because you're already liberated. Okay, then this describes how they attain their enlightenment. So it said that these wise ones, motivated by a sense of urgency, that's the samvega. Samvega means when you reflect on things like old age, sickness, and death, when you see other people meeting, say, with severe sickness, accidents, and you realize how fragile this life is, and you see how much suffering there is in existence, samsaric existence, then you get strongly motivated to reach liberation. And so these who become Pacceka Buddhas, they're motivated by this samvega, this sense of urgency. And so even without the Buddhas, not depending on the instruction of a Buddha, but on their own, through their very sharp wisdom, so they've cultivated in past lives, they've practiced very diligently, cultivating their spiritual faculties, and so they have sharp wisdom. And then, because their wisdom is so sharp, it said, even on the basis of a trifling object, they attained the enlightenment of a Pacceka Buddha. So what's meant by a trifling object? So we have these stories, they're the background stories to the verses spoken in the Sutta Nipāta, supposedly spoken by the Pacceka Buddhas. So they might just see leaves falling from a tree, and then as soon as they see the leaves falling from the tree, they realize, they start reflecting on impermanence. And then because they have this sharp wisdom, that their insight starts to rise up quickly, until right on the spot they might attain Pacceka, the enlightenment of a Pacceka Buddha. Or it's said that there was one, actually the stories of the Pacceka Buddhas that we find in the commentary to the Sutta Nipāta, for some reason they're always kings, almost always kings or princes. And one of them was a king, and his dancing girl had these, are they called bracelets, on the arm? So she was dancing with two bracelets on her arm, and it was making a clanging sound. And so he realized that when you come together with others, then there's going to be clashing and a lot of sort of mental noise arising. And so he realized living as a king is pointless, and then he renounced the kingdom and went forth and became an ascetic and quickly attained enlightenment as a Pacceka Buddha. Okay, so that's what's meant by attaining enlightenment on the basis even of a trifling, insignificant object. And then the Buddha says, apart from me, in all the world, there is none who equals a Pacceka Buddha. So sort of in the spiritual hierarchy, so to speak, the Pacceka Buddhas are ranked right beneath the Sammasambuddha. They're ranked even higher than the great disciples like Sariputta and Moggallana. Because to become a great disciple, you have to depend on the teaching of a Sammasambuddha. But the Pacceka Buddha attains enlightenment on his own. Okay, then the Sutta Nipāta commentary gives us information about the background to attaining enlightenment as a Sammasambuddha, and then we can compare that with the prerequisites for attaining enlightenment as a Pacceka Buddha. So in this account in the Sutta Nipāta commentary, the Venerable Ananda comes to the Buddha and says, how long does it take for a Buddha to realize his aspiration or his vow to achieve Buddhahood? And then the Buddha says that it takes at minimum 4 incalculables and 100,000 aeons. That's at minimum for those who have sharp faculties. For those at the middling level with medium faculties, it takes 8 incalculables and 100,000 great aeons. And then at the maximum, for those with relatively dull faculties, it takes 16 incalculables and 100,000 aeons. And what is the length of first, the length of a great aeon, that's in 100,000 aeons, that is said to be like the amount of time that it takes if there's a mountain 7 miles wide, 7 miles thick, 7 miles high of solid granite, and then a man comes once every 100 years with a piece of Benares cloth, very fine cloth, and just rubs it. Then sooner that mountain would be worn away, but the great aeon would not be finished. Okay, so there's 100,000 of those, but that 100,000 great aeons, that's only like, when you get a meal, then you pay the bill for the meal, and then you pay a little bit extra as the tip, for the waiter. So what is the going rate now for the tip? 20%. Wow, it's gone up pretty high. I mean, compared to the percentage of what 100,000 aeons is to an incalculable, maybe 100,000 aeons compared to it incalculable maybe will be like 3%. I'm not saying, I think the waiters certainly and waitresses certainly should get their full tips. I'm not trying to downsize their tips, but just that percentage is maybe too high for the 100,000 aeons compared to an incalculable. So they call it an incalculable asankhya. This is this Chinese asankhya, is that what it is? Asankhya. So it's supposed to be so long that it's just, we just don't have figures. And I've seen some scholars have given figures. I don't remember what they are, but there'll be so many zeros at the end that we probably can't even fit it on a page of paper. Okay, so these divisions should be understood in the case of those who have wisdom predominant. Those are the ones with 4 incalculables. When faith is predominant, then you have 8 incalculables. When energy is predominant, 16 incalculables. It seems a little counterintuitive to me. I would think that when energy is predominant, that would be the middling person, and the one who has faith, for whom faith is prominent, I would think that would be the lowest, the one with 16 incalculables. Anyway, you get the idea, what it takes to achieve Buddhahood. And this is according to the Pali tradition. The Sanskrit tradition makes it a little easier. It says 3 incalculables. So, 3 or 4 incalculables. Okay, so how long does it take for the aspiration of Pacceka Buddhas to be fulfilled? Okay, for them, it says it takes 2 incalculables and 100,000 aeons. So they get off with half. Wait. Oh, yeah, to reach Pacceka Buddhahood, you only have to practice the parami. What's actually being practiced here are the paramis or paramitas. So it has to practice the paramitas for only 2 incalculables and 100,000 aeons. Then it says it's not possible in less time than this. And having said this, I have to give sort of a footnote or a word of warning that this is what comes in the commentaries. So this is not canonical. And probably in the earliest period, there were maybe no fixed figures were given. But as time went on, the Buddhist community would have sort of reflected what is needed to become a Sammasambuddha, what is needed to become a Pacceka Buddha, and then, well, they put that information into the commentaries in the form of these stories, which are not canonical. Okay, then some of the differences between Buddhas and Pacceka Buddhas. Okay, Buddhas attain enlightenment themselves and enlighten others. Enlighten others means not only that they give others information, but they're able to lead and to guide others to enlightenment, to realization. But it's said that Pacceka Buddhas attain enlightenment themselves, but do not enlighten others. They're not able to convey the truth of their enlightenment to others. It's said, again, that they penetrate the taste of the goal only, but not the taste of the Dharma. That's a little obscure to me. I don't quite understand it. But they are not able to apply conceptual description to the world-transcending Dharma and thereby to teach it. Their breakthrough to the Dhamma is like a dumb person trying to describe the things he has seen in a dream, or like a country dweller trying to describe the dishes he has tasted in the city, or like maybe umbrella. Does anybody know what an umbrella is? You don't know umbrella? Yeah. Oh, you know. Who else knows what an umbrella is? Okay, so it's a fruit that grows in Sri Lanka. Okay, I'm trying to describe it. How do I describe it? How would you describe it?
Maybe a mango that looks like a mango but it's sour.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Like a cross between a mango and a lemon. But that's only sort of a provisional attempt to really know what an umbrella tastes like. You have to taste it. But try to describe the taste of a durian. Wow, it got a lot of laughs. Who knows what a durian tastes like? Quite a lot. Yeah, people smell it, but don't, and say, oh, I don't like the smell, I won't taste it. But the taste is really delicious. And once you get familiar with the delicious taste, then the smell becomes very delicious smell. Okay, so again, continuing, the Pacceka Buddhas achieve all of the psychic powers. So they achieve the various kinds of iddhis, they can multiply their body, they can fly through the sky, they can dive into the earth, walk on water, and so on. They can read the minds of others. They gain all of the meditative attainments. They have all of the 8 samapattis, the meditative attainments, and the attainment of cessation, the cessation of perception and feeling. And they gain the analytical knowledges. They have very keen insight into the Dharma, the many different aspects and nuances of the teachings. And so they're excellent qualities. They're inferior to the Sammasambuddhas, but they're superior even to the chief disciples. And then this is interesting, they give others the going forth, that is, they will ordain others as disciples, as monastic disciples, and they'll train them, here it says they'll train them in proper behavior, but in other places in the commentaries it says that they'll explain meditation practice to their disciples. So they'll guide them in the practice of, the attainment of the jhanas, the levels of samadhi, but I don't recall any passage which says that they train disciples in insight meditation. It seems that for Pacceka enlightenment, one doesn't undertake the systematic practice of insight, but one just develops samadhi, and then at some particular incident will set off that flash of realization and the breakthrough to the ultimate truth. Okay, so that's a little sort of description of the differences between the Sammasambuddha and the Pacceka Buddha. And what's interesting, just one thing that just occurred to me, if you know the story of the life of the Buddha, we know that after he attained the enlightenment at Bodh Gaya, then he was considering, should I teach the Dhamma, should I not teach the Dhamma? And then his initial inclination was, it's too difficult to teach. If I were to try to teach, people, their minds are overrun by lust and hatred and delusion. They wouldn't understand me, and I'll just have to go through a lot of trouble for nothing. So then he said, perhaps I should just keep quiet and live peacefully in the forest. So if he had made that decision, then it seems Or some might say that he could have become a Pacceka Buddha. In fact, there are some scholars who, I don't want to mention any names, since one of them is my good friend, who say that that was a real decision that the Buddha had to come to, and that he could have really made that decision not to teach the Dhamma. So I think that this is a sort of literary fiction set up just to emphasize how difficult it is to teach the Dhamma and to get others to understand it. Okay, any questions on this discussion? Wow, a lot of questions. Okay, Ravi, Will, and Treya, did you have?
I did, but I actually have a thought, so you read my mind.
Oh, I thought,
Call on me if I could.
okay. Then I saw, then John's hand came up behind you, so I might have.
Heard my mind because I didn't
Okay, Ravi, and please take the microphone.
Thank you, Band. But the first question is, the Sutta Nipāta was the discourse of the Buddha itself, was it?
Sutta Nipāta.
The Sutta Nipāta that you said a lot of this stuff is?
I'm not understanding. I'm not hearing
The
clearly.
Sutta Nipāta, the book in
The Sutta Nipāta.
Nipāta, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not pronouncing it right.
yeah.
Was that what the Buddha preached? Buddha said?
Most of the suttas in the Sutta Nipāta are said to have been spoken by the Buddha. There are other suttas in the Sutta Nipāta that are in verse in which no authorship is ascribed.
Okay.
It's taken that they're spoken by the Buddha. It's like even the famous popular Metta Sutta. It doesn't say in the Metta Sutta this was spoken by the Buddha. It's just...
But I was under the impression that Pacceka Buddha arises in the absence of the Dhamma.
Oh, that's actually a very important point, and I forgot to mention that. Yes, very important point, thank you. That Pacceka Buddhas don't arise at the time that a Buddha is existing in the world. Why that is so, we don't understand, we don't know. But it's said that when a Buddha arises, you know, he's teaching in India, say he's teaching in northern India, so it can't be the case that some ascetic in South India, in Thailand, in North America, any place else, is meditating on his own and achieves enlightenment as a Pacceka Buddha. Maybe it's like the vibrational field of a Sammasambuddha is such that it just excludes the possibility of attaining enlightenment as a Pacceka Buddha. And there are some stories, actually there's a story, it's in a Sanskrit word called the Mahavastu, that there are a group of Pacceka Buddhas or Pratyeka Buddhas. They're living together at Isipatana, or Ishipatana. That's the place where the Buddha gave his first discourse. And then they see various auspicious signs in the sky and so forth, and they wonder, they inquire, what are those auspicious signs? And then they realize that these are the signs that a bodhisattva is about to be born into the world. And then they realize that we can't go on living. And so then they cross their legs and they enter into the samadhi, and then from their samadhi they burn up their bodies and pass into nirvana.
So Bhante, at one point you referred to the Pacceka Buddha's teachings. So that would have come from the Buddha himself then?
That the Pacceka Buddha teaches.
Yeah, but...
No, that comes in the commentary.
In the commentary?
Yeah.
So that's not the Buddha. How do they know? That's my question.
Yeah, in the suttas themselves, close to nothing is said about Pacceka Buddhas. They're mentioned, and then there's one sutta which, it's a kind of praise to Pacceka Buddhas. It's Majjhima Nikaya, sutta number 116. but it really says nothing concrete about them. It just gives their names and a series of epithets about them, praising them, but it doesn't say what they do, what their way of life is. So almost all the information that we have about Pacceka Buddhas comes from the commentaries.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah. Okay, Will, and then first we'll take John since he had his hand up, and then Drea can ask hers. And then Johnny after. Oh, you have one online, but first we'll take the classroom.
Okay. Bhante, I just wanted to make sure that when Buddha passes, they are free from samsara, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And incalculable.
Yeah.
Kalpa being the Sanskrit,
Yeah,
kappa being
aeon
the...
is a rendering of kalpa,
Okay.
or it's mahakalpa, or mahakappa in Pali.
I'll just put the maha.
Yeah.
And one other one. I've also seen Pacceka Buddhas translated in English at least as private Buddhas. I've actually seen that, and I can't remember where or
Yeah,
who was
these are just various
translator was.
various makeshift attempts to translate that word Pacceka or Pratyeka.
Mm-hmm.
So private is probably, prati is sort of inward towards oneself, eka, one, solitary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so private Buddha, individual Buddha, solitary, though it's not quite correct.
Thank you.
Okay, and Ken?
Bhante, growing up in Sri Lanka, I've heard that Devadatta would eventually become a Passe Buddha.
Yeah, this is what it said, yeah. I believe the story is commentarial, not canonical, but it said that Devadatta was the Buddha's cousin, antagonistic cousin, who tried to overthrow the Buddha and get control of the Sangha. Then he tried to assassinate the Buddha, and then he split the Sangha. So he committed all of these very strong, grave, horrendous deeds. So those deeds would have destined him for a rebirth in hell. And it said that when he realized his wrongs against the Buddha, he wanted to come to see the Buddha in order to apologize. But the Buddha, I think staying in Jeta's Grove, said, Devadatta will not be able to reach me. And so as Devadatta was approaching the Buddha, then the ground split apart underneath his feet, and he fell into the Avicii, the lowest hell. But then the Buddha then gave the prediction that he will remain in hell for such a long period of time, but finally, at some distant point in the future, he will become a Pacceka Buddha he then gives the name of that Pacceka Buddha.
Yeah. And one more clarification, actually. So, so technically, there can't be a Pacceka Buddha since Buddha.
There can be a Pacceka.
So there cannot be a Pacceka Buddha since Gautama Buddha, right?
Yeah. There can't be Pacceka Buddhas as long as the teaching of Gautama Buddha survives.
Survives, okay.
Yeah, it's only when the teaching of a Buddha, of a fully enlightened Buddha, disappears, then there's a kind of period of spiritual darkness descends, and in that period of spiritual darkness, there can still arise these little points of light, which would be Pacceka Buddhas, because the nature of things always remains the same, so Pacceka Buddhas can realize the nature of things.
Yes, Bhante, what would cause the teachings to disappear?
What causes the teachings to disappear? Many factors, yeah. We could look in Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fours, also Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fives. Actually, it's some suttas mention a number of things that cause the teaching to disappear. When the monks, nuns, male lay followers, lay male followers, female lay followers, do not have reverence and deference towards the Tathagata, towards the Dharma, towards the Sangha, towards the training, towards samadhi, concentration, those factors cause the teaching to disappear. Then there's another sutta, let's see where that occurs. I think this is in the Samyutta Nikaya, Satipatthana Samyutta. It said when the 4 foundations of mindfulness are neglected, then the teaching disappears. When the 4 foundations of mindfulness are practiced, then the teaching continues. Please use the microphone.
This would mean that they would disappear universally.
Yeah, it means disappears from this world. Yeah, another sutta says it's when the senior monks don't teach and train the junior monks, and when the senior monks don't practice diligently and don't teach and train the junior monks, but instead the senior monks becomes lax and negligent, then those in the later generation, the next generation, follow their example. They become lax and negligent, and this way it continues. And did we have a question from the internet?
You might have already answered that, actually.
Okay.
The question is, there are many stories in Zen tradition where practitioner attains sudden enlightenment triggered by a random event.
Yeah.
Were those also attainment of a Pacceka Buddhahood?
No. Because to become a Pacceka Buddha, it has to occur during a period when the teaching of a Sammasambuddha is not known.
I have a question of my own. If a stream enterer,
Yeah.
I'm talking about the last stream enterer of Buddha Sakyamuni, and pass to another life, and there's no more vulnerable truth being known to mankind.
Yeah.
And then he attained arahantship right there.
Yeah.
Is he a Pacceka Buddha or
No.
arahant?
No. Because he's already made the initial breakthrough through the teaching of the Sammasambuddha. Pacceka Buddha discovers the Four Noble Truths without any guidance or instruction from others. Okay, let us go on, see if we could cover some. Okay, then we have a series of suttas very similar. 2 who are not terrified by a bursting thunderbolt, a monk whose taints are destroyed, that's an arahat, and a thoroughbred elephant. And then the same thing, except a thoroughbred horse. Then the commentary says, the arahat is not terrified because he has abandoned Sakkaya Ditthi, the view of a personal self, whereas the elephant is not frightened because his view of a self is very strong. So he thinks, I'm more powerful than the thunderbolt. Okay, then basically the same pattern, except now the animal is the lion. This is a strange sutta. For 2 reasons, the word used here is fawn. We'll look at the note which gives the Pali word. For 2 reasons, fawns do not utter human speech. What are the 2? May we not speak falsely, and may we not misrepresent another with what is contrary to fact. For these reasons, fawns do not utter human speech. Okay, what's called a fawn, translated as a fawn, the Pali word is kim purisa. The word kim is the question word, which normally means what, and purisa is person. And this is a mythical class of beings in Indian folklore. They're said to live in the forest, deep in the forest. And it's similar to, I think they're the same as there's another word, kinnara, kinnara. And this is the same in Chinese. You have Chinnala, is that what it is? The god of the kitchen. Chinnala. We have, if you look in the kitchen, oh, you would know because you volunteer cooking. There's the god, protective god of the kitchen. He has his little statue, and before the meal is served to everybody else, he gets his offering. So that's a kinnara, the same as a kimpurisa.
Bhante, in European pagan mythology, there's a fawn also, the god Pan.
Yeah.
And when you were reading them, I was thinking of a fawn, from European.
And interestingly, in
They have the goat's horns and they play the panpipes and
yeah, I don't know that they're depicted in that way in the Pali or in the Indian tradition. But in the Indian, I remember a Sanskrit Mahayana Buddha Sutra where there's the king of the Kinnaras, at least one of the kings. Either he plays a musical instrument himself or he has an entourage of musicians, other Kinnaras who are like celestial musicians. Anyway, we don't have to really get hung up on the idea of fawns, but the point of the sutta is, in a way, it's conveying a message to human beings that if even these mythological beings are hesitant to speak from fear of speaking falsely and from fear of misrepresenting others, then we who are human beings should take that as guides to our speech. And also it seems to be saying that this is the problem with human beings. Yeah, too often. I mean, this is in the Buddha's time, 2,500 years ago. Now you go on any website, news website, well, not the real news, but the commentary website, news commentary, and you get so much falsehood spread around and misrepresenting others with what is contrary to fact. Was it the Inquirer? There's a newspaper, the Inquirer, that's like that. Okay, this is good. I don't think I could skip over this. I don't know whether it's true or not, or how it got in there. Women die unsatisfied and discontent in two things. What two? Sexual intercourse and giving birth. I don't think this is true, certainly about giving birth. Because why women want methods of birth control so that they're not giving birth all the time? You can't have one without the other. Well, with birth control, you can have sexual relations without giving birth.
But giving birth requires...
Yeah, of course, giving birth requires sexual intercourse.
Can I offer my answer to that?
Yeah,
Is a desire usually generate another desire,
yeah,
so it's never satisfied.
yeah.
That will be my interpretation.
Well, I don't think it's so universally true. And also, I have to say that when you look at who are responsible mostly for rapes in the world, is it women raping men, men raping women? It's men raping women. who is responsible most for like sexual provocation or misconduct at workplaces? Women provoking and abusing men, or men abusing and provoking women? Who are the main consumers of pornography? Big market for women? No, probably just a sliver. And maybe it's mainly women doing research on pornography, but the ones who are purchasing it for the enjoyment will be men. And then what was the big hit magazine of 1950s, 1960s, 1970s with the centerfold?
Playboy.
I was going to ask, was it Playgirl? I think they tried putting out something called Playgirl, the same company, and it flopped. It was a flop. It didn't really work. Yeah, so it seems to me, some suttas have to say, one has to put a question mark. Okay. Does anybody have any comments about this? Don't feel shy.
Maybe it made more sense in the context he gave it, because it kind of shows up out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, some might say, okay, the Buddha was teaching primarily monks, and so he would have given this as a kind of warning, be careful not to get too close to women.
Yeah.
But there would be other ways to say that, which would not seem to be a little bit slighting women. Anybody else have any comments or questions? It's a man's
version, because how can a man know about the pleasure of the woman? It's actually impossible. We assume the man's pleasure is also there with the woman. In fact, now I think the world is, with all these equal rights,
Yeah.
even Playgirl will be very welcome today, I think.
What is that?
The Playgirl magazines and all these things, so much of sexual liberation. I mean, everything goes.
No, I don't think there are these.
Yeah. But a man really wouldn't really understand how a woman feels, or vice versa.
Yeah. Anyway, let us pass on to the next. Oops. Okay, this sutta actually has important point, even though it's spoken about in relation to monastics, but it's relevant to any group of people who have to live together. So he's speaking about, what's here the word used? Co-residency, simply means living together. So the way the bad live together and the way the good live together. And this could be applied to any community that's dedicated to living together in accordance with the Dharma. Okay, so how do the bad live together? And so it occurs to an elder bhikkhu, an elder monk. He thinks that another monk, whether an elder, one of middle standing, or one who's junior to myself, should not correct me, and I should not correct an elder monk or one of middle standing or a junior. Okay, now this is one of the points or principles that the Buddha laid down for the monastic order, is that the monastics, whether amongst the monks or amongst the nuns, should correct one another if one sees another committing some kind of fault, engaged in some kind of misconduct. He says that this is the way the Sangha flourishes and grows, through mutual correction, mutual admonition, mutual rehabilitation, lifting each other up. But it can happen, and like this is one of the things you could say that contributes to the decline of the Dharma in the world. That, if one commits some fault, then one doesn't want to be corrected by others because there's an ego there, unless one is an arahat, or even, maybe even a stream enterer has gotten over enough of the ego, but anybody less than that still has some sense of ego that I don't want others to point out my faults. We all think I'm perfect, right? And so if somebody criticizes me, then they're sort of challenging my conception of myself. And so I make in my mind a kind of deal that I don't want others to correct me, and like in exchange, I won't correct you. So we can just do whatever we want, and we can just continue doing what we want. Okay, so then he continues to reason. So he's afraid if an elder corrects me, he might do so without sympathy. And then if somebody corrects me, then I'm not going to follow his advice. So I would then say no to him. And then that would trouble him. And even if he points out some fault of mine, I'm not going to change my ways for him. So I would not make amends for it. Okay, the rest just develops the same template for a monk of middle standing and junior standing. Sort of the general way is for the elders to correct the juniors, but interestingly, in the Vinaya, the Buddha says that if a student sees his teacher doing something wrong, he should point it out to the teacher, correct the teacher. It's not the principle where the teacher is the guru. Who are you to point out to the teacher? But you just have to follow whatever the teacher says. But if the pupil sees the teacher misbehaving or adopting a wrong view, then he should point out the misbehavior and wrong view. Okay, so that's the way it's called co-residency, or living together amongst the bad. So they all make this kind of agreement with each other, and in this way they don't correct one another, and so each one behaves the way he wants to, and their conduct deteriorates, and then the whole community deteriorates. And when you have everybody acting in whatever way they want, what is the ultimate result? Chaos. And what else? Fall apart. Yeah, fall apart through what? Conflict, divisions, splintering into different factions. And then the opposite, how do the good live together? So here it occurs to an elder monk. So he thinks an elder, one who is elder to myself, should correct me. One of middle standing, one who is on my own level should correct me. And even a junior should correct me. And I should correct one who's older, one of middle standing, or a junior. And then one thinks, when you have this community of the good living together, then you think that when an elder corrects me, he's doing so out of sympathy or out of compassion for me. And then the proper attitude is when you get this advice and correction, you think good and you say good, or you say sadhu, thank you, and then you correct your ways, and that way there's no trouble for the other person, and you see your fault and you change your ways, so you make amends for it. And so that is the way the good live together. So that could apply, I would say, even within a family. You don't have to say only within a monastic community. That if you have a family trying to live according to some ethical code of conduct, and then one of them is, say, the children are not showing proper respect to the parents, the children are just saying, I want to watch, they don't want to sit down for dinner, but they run off to watch television or play with their computer or iPad, then the parents have to discipline the children. And children have to show respect to the parents. Okay, any questions about this? Okay, so maybe we should break now for the lunch, and then we come back here, let's say 12:30. Okay. And for those who maybe who won't be coming back, we'll have the class next Saturday in the library also, because there's going to be a meditation retreat taking place up the hill.
The cosmos, there's so much of possibility that there could be life out there in the cosmos, many, many light years away.
Yeah.
Now when you say the Buddha, Dhamma, and
Yeah.
there won't be a Pacceka Buddha, could it be that there could be Pacceka Buddha?
Oh, yeah. We're talking only about this world.
Only this one.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so let us end with the sharing of the merits. So we share the merits with the devas, the protective deities, the nagas or dragon spirits, the bhutas or fear spirits, inviting them to rejoice in these merits, and by rejoicing to protect the Dharma in the world, to protect the people of the world. Akasata chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Bhavagupadaya vichihetato etantare satakayupapana rupya rupicha asanya sanino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibuting. Okay, we could stand and then we can do 3 half bows to the Buddha.